Nancy Pelosi, unmasked or masked? Her latest hypocrisy.
Live from Washington, D.C., Sekulow Live.
It's critical that they follow the science.
Everything else we're talking about will just continue and perhaps worsen unless we crush the virus. So follow the science.
Phone lines are open for your questions right now. Call 1-800-684-3110.
If the entire country can go without a mask indoors when only 60% are vaccinated, then certainly the science says we in the House chamber can go maskless. And if people want to wear their mask, if they're insecure, I trust the science. I trust the vaccine. I know that we're not transmitting. And Nancy Pelosi should follow the science, not find the science.
And now your host, Logan Sekulow.
Welcome to Sekulow. This is Logan Sekulow. I'm joined by Will Haynes, Harry Hutchinson, Andy Economo in studio, and later on by Mike Pompeo will be joining us. So we have a big show lined up. We're going to talk right now, though, about what's going on in Washington, D.C. with Nancy Pelosi. And look, I will say this is a general thing that happened as soon as the CDC. Now, we've been told for the last year, and look, I've been someone who's been a proponent of things like masks and vaccines. I'm not the person out there who's saying don't do these things. You shouldn't have done them. I'm very much on board with saying let's follow the science. But then science pulled a fast one, it feels like, on the controlling Democratic Party and the liberals and said, by the way, because you guys have been following us for the last year, the CDC just, a week or so ago, right, said, hey, masks indoors, outdoors, you're fully vaccinated, you're all good. Take them off, throw them away. And we've seen businesses, we've seen companies, we've seen public areas start to reverse their mask policies. I was in a grocery store yesterday as it was happening, as they were taking down the signs. And it was a big moment. They played an announcement over the speakers that said, if you are fully vaccinated, guess what? We are following all CDC guidelines, and the CDC says, take off your masks. And there was a big moment in the store. Like, some people were cheering. It was actually kind of a fun. I'm not a big grocery shopper. I'm not good at it. I've been horrible at it.
You don't plan out your grocery shopping.
I don't know where anything is.
Which aisle you need to go to next.
Like,
and
what
so you're
section
all over
do you
the
think
place.
the sour cream is in?
It's in the dairy section.
See, I didn't know that. I had to Google it.
You Googled? You didn't just ask a clerk?
You know, that never goes well.
Okay,
Also, for my own
fair.
embarrassment, I was like in the milk. Like, where do I go here? I eventually found the sour cream, but
You weren't far.
But I had to do a couple, like looking at the mid carts. Either way, that's not the point. Nancy Pelosi is not one of the people, though. Unlike Disney World, that's allowing you to go now with no mask outside, at least. Inside, a lot of these places are starting. We're starting to see the big reversal, the big trends. But, Will, in the chambers,
That's right.
not so fast. And look, this happened in the New York Times the day after the CDC and Fauci and everyone said it's time to take off the mask. The New York Times put out an article and said, well, our scientists and our doctors say, no, too soon, after a year of being told to follow the CDC, which, again, I happily did. Like, I wasn't one of the people out there complaining, but I'm going to also follow their guidelines over this time. Now that they say to take it off, guess what I'm doing? I'm doing it. But Pelosi said...
So she has maintained a mask mandate for the House chamber. Now, Chuck Schumer, over on the Senate side, they don't have to wear the mask if they are in compliance with the CDC guidance.
Yep.
But in the House chamber, still mandating this. And just last night, Nancy Pelosi went to a gathering at the White House in the East Room for a bill signing ceremony. And what was she there? We have B-roll of it going right now. She's maskless, hugging people. There she is with the Attorney General, hugging senators. Very close, not social distancing, anything. So it's fine for her to go to the White House maskless, but not on the House floor.
It's always political, and it always goes against of course, this is to make a statement to not only the American people, but to the conservatives in the room who are maybe on the other side. She wants to slap fines on them, has been doing that, right, including those that are doctors running vaccine clinics. They're getting slapped with $500 fines if they don't wear a mask. This is where it does start to play into your theories of, is this all about some kind of control? And when the control starts to slip away, when the CDC starts to show maybe they aren't as biased as some people believe, this is what happens. They flip the game on you. We'll be right back with more on Sekulow.
I rise today on an issue critical to this chamber, setting an example for the rest of the country. Yesterday, the CDC issued guidance that fully vaccinated individuals can resume indoor activities without wearing a mask or physically distancing. I am pleased to see the CDC following the science and recommending that fully vaccinated individuals can go without masks indoors. As members of Congress, we should not only encourage constituents to get vaccinated, we should be showing them what a return to normal looks like and follow the science.
A vote in the House of Representatives showing just how political mask wearing has now become. The minority leader, Republican Kevin McCarthy, made a proposal to have the office of the attending physician update mask wearing requirements for vaccinated lawmakers. That proposal was defeated along party lines.
And it wasn't just the CDC's recommendations that changed. Our own attending physician who works for Speaker Pelosi and works at his discretion said that you don't have to wear masks in the Capitol anymore. So if you walk around the hallways today, you don't have to wear a mask. Staffers aren't wearing masks today. You only have to wear a mask on the House floor because apparently Speaker Pelosi wants to be queen of the House floor and dictate to Republicans and mask us on the House floor in complete opposition to her own attending physician in the CDC.
It's not her responsibility to go out there and manage the health of every individual that exists on this planet. But this is really why it's so dangerous and where they're moving to. They believe a couple of fundamental things. One, that they should be able to fine Americans if you don't do what they say. Two, that you should have to share your personal health information with them.
Everyone says follow the science, but the science obviously isn't following the politics of Nancy Pelosi, and she's just using us. I don't even know why anymore, but it's insanity. We're the one place in the country where if you're going to have herd immunity, we've got it, and we should be leading our country and showing people how to safely move forward with COVID-19 for those who are vaccinated.
Welcome back to Sekulow. Again, this is Logan Sekulow wrapping up your week here. We're wrapping up with a little bit of an old school show, having some fun here after a week of a pretty rough time, whether we were talking about what's going on the border, whether we're talking about what's going on in Israel. We do have to say there was at least on paper or technically, a ceasefire in Israel. There's already been some chaos that has broken out since, but we'll keep an eye on that. Especially, we'll try to talk to Mike Pompeo about that. But for right now, we're talking about what's going on in Washington, D.C. and the controversial topic at this point of mask wearing, especially for those who are vaccinated. This has become it's not shocking. What it does is it elevates anyone's theories when the CDC and even President Biden comes out and says, hey guys, now I think maybe some of that timing was convenient to maybe brush over the fact that there's chaos in the Middle East and there's all this stuff happening. Yeah, maybe, but you know what? I'm not complaining. So the CDC says it's fine. Take off your mask. The Biden administration says take off your mask. But Nancy Pelosi says take off your mask, except for in the chambers, because I want to make sure that those who are showing maybe a different side politically are mocked, are made fun of, and then are fined on top of that. Find real money. And look, some of these people are not coming from extreme wealth. So they're taking a risk here. I want you to give us a call. I want to hear your thoughts. 1-800-684-3110. That's 1-800-684-3110. And maybe we should play, just so people know, Will, maybe we should play a little bit from Nancy Pelosi just to hear what she had to say not all that long ago. Let's go to Bite 26.
And again, this is about science and governance. And science and governance, we have a responsibility to make sure that the House of the Representatives chamber is not a petri dish because of the selfishness of some not to be vaccinated.
So it's okay for me to walk around a grocery store, assuming the fact that maybe, in throughout the country, 70% of adults have been vaccinated. But for the Senate chambers or the Congress, you're talking about probably a handful of people in there that have not yet been vaccinated, maybe more. I'm not sure. I don't know their exact numbers, but I'm sure the percentage lines up pretty close, if not more.
It's probably more. And actually, we have a bite from Congresswoman Miller Meeks, who she is a physician. She has run vaccine clinics, and she was fined for not wearing a mask in the House chamber because in her opinion, as a doctor, it's now not reasonable to be wearing that. She's following CDC guidelines like we have been told for well over a year now. Follow the CDC guidelines, follow the science. But this is what she had to say about being fined and this oppressive rule from Speaker Pelosi. Let's play bite 16.
If the entire country can go without a mask indoors when only 60% are vaccinated, then certainly the science says we in the House chamber can go maskless. And if people want to wear their mask, if they're insecure, I trust the science. I trust the vaccine. I know that we're not transmitting. And Nancy Pelosi should follow the science, not find the science.
And she clearly is following the science when she goes to a White House party. A White House ceremony.
Yeah, personally, for her own personal.
Right.
Now, I know they've said that, are they checking our vaccines going to the White House?
I don't know. If they
I know
are or
they've
not.
said specifically, if you have had the vaccine, you no longer have to wear a mask. Look, I walked around a grocery store yesterday. There was plenty of people maskless. There was also plenty of people, it was probably about that. It was probably 60, 70% of people were not in masks, and a good 30% were still wearing their mask. And you know what? Do what you want to do. And that's kind of how I felt the whole time. I'm not telling you not to wear a mask. I'm not telling you to or not to get vaccinated. Personally, I made those decisions, and it's up to your personal decision. However, if we're going to follow the guidelines, and this is how I've always felt for last year, if we're going to follow the guidelines, we have to be consistent, or it does start to become the feeling that this is a political game, and that for some reason you don't then trust the vaccine. Like, it becomes a much bigger question when we're following, at this point, what the Biden administration has not only suggested, has pretty much mandated, which is you had the vaccine, you're fully vaccinated, you've had to wait the 2 weeks, and you're good to go.
Well, and she also said it's about science and governance. Actually, I don't think it's about science at all for her. Because if you'll remember back earlier on in the pandemic, she's the one who didn't have her mask on when she was getting her hair done, very close to a hairstylist, and there she is. We have the video of it. So she wasn't following the science there. What it's about is governance. And when I hear Nancy Pelosi say it's about governance, it's about power.
Yeah,
it's about her power, her control, and that's what we're seeing play out here.
Yeah, we do have quite a few calls coming in. I want to hear from you again, 1-800-684-3110. If you're watching on social media, on Facebook, click that share button. I'd love for you to share. Gets into more people's feeds. If you're on Twitter or you're watching on YouTube, Twitter, obviously retweet this. If you're on YouTube, click that thumbs up. You'll see that thumbs up and subscribe. Feels weird to say that, but that's what you need to do, because the more people like it, the more people that are active, the more people will get this served into their feeds. It's how it works. So if you want people to know about this kind of show and get informed from maybe the right point of view, do that for us. We really appreciate it. Should we take a call, since I know coming up in the next segment, we have Mike Pompeo, so I want to make sure we take some calls and have time to get through them and get through some more. So let's go to Lisa in California on line 2. Lisa, you're on the air.
Hi, how you doing?
I'm good. How are you?
I'm all right. My comment is this. The point of the vaccinations are so we don't have to wear masks. But Dr. Fauci, I think, said a while back that we should wear masks anyway, just in case we can give it to someone else. The point of the vaccination is immunity. If we build immunity, then we can't contract it in order to give it to someone else. Yeah. So I think they like to control the masses through fear, and it's like it's almost a test, and they appreciate the power. Now, I'm not cynical, but I believe that I see things for what they are.
Lisa, it's hard.
Good for Lisa for not being cynical, because it's hard to not be cynical.
It's hard not to be
when you see these things.
As someone who has, again, sort of followed the guidelines, like here in office, we followed the guidelines that would roll out. I had the vaccine. I'm not afraid to say that. I know this that may be controversial to some people. I'm not afraid to say that I did it. And look, you said a lot of people are doing it to get rid of the mask. That's not necessarily the reason that I got it. However, I've had younger people, younger than me even, who have told me I had no intention on getting it, but as soon as they said you don't have to wear a mask, they got it. And that's part of marketing in some weird way, because they are having to figure out how to get younger people to take the vaccine. So to say, like you said, to dangle that carrot and say, you don't have to wear the mask, there's enough people that go, okay, fine, you got me, I'll do it. And that is an interesting marketing thing. We could talk about that another day. But Harry, when it comes to this situation at hand, when they aren't following what the science is saying, they're not following the CDC guidelines, they're making this a political statement.
Absolutely. So it's not about the science. It's about power. It's about control. It is about being an authoritarian. But most of all, it is about one thing and one thing only: hypocrisy on stilts. So the left does not believe really in the science. They don't believe in personal responsibility. They don't really believe in personal choice unless one is considering aborting a child after the child has been born. So at the end of the day, it's about social control. And so if you drive the streets throughout the United States, you will occasionally come across individuals driving their car alone, wearing their mask. Why? They are telling the rest of us that they are prepared to be compliant even if there is no scientific basis for it. And Nancy Pelosi has tapped into this sense. And I think at the end of the day, particularly in blue states, it may unfortunately be working.
Yeah, I think so. I've been hearing from a lot of my friends, obviously, even though this big rollout has happened, that it isn't across the country. Thankfully, where we are, it has started to get that way. But look, I'm going to an event tonight in Arena. They said, hey, we have to follow this. I was like, the NHL. NHL has said, hey, we're still keeping the mask for right now, and we'll see. Now, they have teams in Canada. They have teams throughout, so I think there is some different rules and laws there they have to abide by. But they've even said, like, look, we're trying. They've made a big deal out keeping people informed, saying, hey, we're trying to alleviate this situation. Just bear with us. They were hoping to by the first round. They've even said, we're hoping by the second round of the NHL playoffs, we'll be able to remove the mask mandate, which is interesting actually to see, again, from a marketing point of view, being kind of like hey, look, we're not making the rules here. We're just trying to follow because we're an international body. Interesting, just tidbit there. Will?
Exactly. I like your passion.
Yeah. So, hey, coming up next is Secretary Mike Pompeo will be joining us, and we'll be talking about a lot of different things. He has a new blog that's up on ACLJ.org. The Biden administration continues to let China win, is what it's called. And we're going to discuss that, as well as we'll try to dip into the Middle East. We'll talk about some other things going on, but we're going to focus on that blog. You can go read it, even right now, during the commercial break at ACLJ.org. Probably can't finish it, but you can try your best. And then come back and listen to it. We'll talk about it when we get back. Phone lines are completely full right now, but surely they will open up at 1-800-684-3110 and support the work of the ACLJ by visiting ACLJ.org, downloading the ACLJ app, and clicking donate and clicking share. That helps out just as much. We'll be right back.
Joining us now to talk about foreign policy now and in the future, the Secretary of State of the United States, Mike Pompeo.
This is a different day and age, a different United States of America foreign policy. Well, Mike Pompeo said the policies of the previous administration really brought havoc to the region.
Joining me right now with his reaction and the state of affairs right now between the U.S. and China is U.S. Secretary of State Mike Pompeo.
China's entry into Iran will destabilize the Middle East. It'll put Israel at risk. What we've attempted to do is make clear to China, if you want to participate on the world stage, you can't engage in behavior like this.
Secretary of State Mike Pompeo is urging Turkey to release detained American pastor Andrew Brunson.
This morning, Pastor Andrew Brunson, who was in prison in Turkey for nearly 2 years, has been let out of jail.
The ACLJ was at the very center of making the world aware of the plight of Pastor Brunson. They raised awareness of this, and then the administration took this very seriously. In my time in service, both as the CIA Director and as Secretary of State, I watched the good work that the ACLJ was doing here in the States and all across the world.
This is a moment in the history of the American Center for Law and Justice. Secretary Pompeo has had an incredible career already, serving in Congress, was the director of the CIA, and of course, most recently, the Secretary of State for the United States of America.
The work that we do with this current administration will save lives and protect America and keep us free and safe and strong.
Well, I'm very happy to announce that former Secretary of State Mike Pompeo is now a senior counsel for global affairs for the American Center for Law and Justice.
The ACLJ today is needed now more than ever, and that's why I am so thrilled to be a part of this really important organization.
Welcome back to Sekulow. Joining us today, Senior Counsel for Global Affairs and former U.S. Secretary of State Mike Pompeo to discuss, among many things, a brand new blog that he has just put out on ACLJ.org entitled "The Biden Administration Continues to Let China Win." And that's a topic that we've brought up multiple times. And the main question, I guess, to start this off, is tell us about the blog. And do you think the policies of this administration toward China are putting us in our security at risk, essentially, at this point?
Well, this challenge, thanks for having me on. This challenge from the Chinese Communist Party is real. It is going to be confronting us for a long time. We need to push back against it in a serious way. I've watched the Biden administration. The rhetoric's been good, but I haven't seen the actions. I'll give you just a couple examples. I talk about them in my blog at the ACLJ's website. Think of COVID. Think of the Wuhan virus. We know that this came from Wuhan. All the evidence today points that it came from a laboratory leak that they were in charge of in Wuhan, called the Wuhan Institute of Virology. And yet, in multiple conversations between the president and General Secretary Xi Jinping, President Biden says he hasn't raised this issue. We're going to end up with just the same thing happening again. The Chinese Communist Party continues to operate these laboratories. They're doing it in a way that is unsafe. They're conducting research that ought not to be taking place in laboratories like that. This impacts every American. It impacts people all across the world. We've seen this with the loss of life of millions of people around the world, billions of dollars in wealth destruction. This is a place we confronted China in the Trump administration. It's just an example of how this administration is appeasing China in a way that presents real risk to each and every American.
Well, and we also know, and you pointed out in your article at ACLJ.org, that China's foreign minister recently said if the U.S. no longer interferes in China's internal affairs, then we can have even smoother cooperation on climate change. And we know Secretary Kerry has signaled that we need to separate the climate change issue from other issues we may have with China. Has the administration not looked at any past dealings with China? And how can they believe that they're dealing with a good faith negotiator?
Boy, that's a great point. Look, when the United States said the United States will re-enter the Paris Climate Accords, this is a global agreement on carbon reduction. People make promises as part of this agreement. I'm confident that China has no intention of living up to even the weak commitments that it made. And this administration seems not to get that. They believe that more engagement, more work with China will convince them to be better stewards around the world, not only with environmental issues, but in allowing travel through the South China Sea, all the things that matter to people living in places like Kansas and Nevada and across America. We've got to get this right. Just think about this one point for a moment. We're going to now trade security issues for the United States. We're going to allow the Chinese Communist Party to conduct genocide in the western part of its country. We're going to let them terrorize Southeast Asia by denying them the ability to just live the way that they want to and use their resources the way they want to. And we're going to trade that for some promise that about environmental issues that the Chinese Communist Party has no intention of living up to. They have they built more brand new coal-fired power plants last year than they did even the year before that.
Mr. Secretary, let me ask you this. Instead of placating and playing up to the Chinese Communist Party as the Biden administration is doing, how should Biden work to hold China accountable?
Well, first thing is, this is not just the U.S. versus Chinese Communist Party. This is those of us who believe in freedom and democracy around the world. So he should be working and developing close relationships with India, with South Korea, with Japan, with Australia, big economies with real capacity to confront this these terrible policies that emanate from the Chinese Communist Party. Second, when it comes to accountability, President Trump did it. They were trading in the United States and destroying jobs and wealth here in the United States. We put tariffs on them. They were spying in the United States, and we closed their consulate in Houston. They were challenging us in the South China Sea, and we began to send ships that traveled in the Taiwan Straits. Those are the kinds of things that an administration that is serious about sending a deterrence message. We don't want war with the Chinese Communist Party. If we send a deterrence message, if they know that America is rising, America is strong, and America is prepared to defend its own citizens, then the Chinese Communist Party will back down. If we don't, if we appease them, they will drive a truck through it.
Secretary Pompeo, I wanted to quickly just kind of move topics a little bit. We saw it kind of overnight in the last day or so. a technical, at least on paper, ceasefire that happened in Israel, between Israel and Hamas. I wanted to get your take on that, because it seems that even with this ceasefire, if you will, that these two sides could not be more, further apart. And what is your take on what's happening right now and what the path is forward?
Oh goodness, that's certainly true. Remember, this would be the most recent in a series of ceasefires. Right. Every time Israel responds and begins to crush Hamas's military power, Hamas screams for a ceasefire, and the world, sadly, puts pressure on Israel to do just that. Well, here's what you won't see in the ceasefire agreement. I haven't seen it, but you won't see this. You won't see Hamas renouncing its desire to wipe Israel off the face of the earth. You won't see Hamas saying we will never be terrorists again. You won't see Hamas saying we'll no longer take money from the terrorists in Iran. This is good news. If there's not killing, if there's not violence, this is always good news. But the threat, the desire of Iran and Hamas and Hezbollah to wipe Israel off the face of the earth, that hasn't changed. This ideological intent has not changed. And that means the United States continues to have a responsibility to make unambiguously clear that we will support Israel in its right to defend itself, and we will assist them with the tools and capabilities that they need to do just that.
I know we talked about, when you were on earlier this week, sort of the emotional impact for a lot of us of the Abraham Accords, what it meant to us over the last multiple years to see Israel finally, getting maybe some respect again from the U.S. government for I didn't think we'd live in a world where it'd be this divided, where now we're seeing even anti-Semitism taking out the streets in New York and L.A., places where the Jewish communities are thriving, are really the biggest places for Jewish communities, maybe L.A. and New York and Chicago and a few others. We're seeing in Times Square, Palestinian activists, Hamas activists, attacking just random people who they identify as Jewish or people that they get into a conflict with. We saw this in L.A. We saw customers of a restaurant get singled out because of their faith. It's a disheartening time, knowing Secretary Pompeo just how good things were. And when I was on this show shortly after the election, or even before, and I said what people are going to forget about very quickly, what they're going to remember very quickly, is how quiet it has been in the Middle East, how ISIS was wiped out, how things were. We weren't even thinking about what was happening in the Middle East. We were planning full trips before COVID, planning our full trips for our crew to go to Israel. This was not a time of chaos.
It is so heart-wrenching to watch what's taking place in these streets of the United States of America. I must say that the work that President Trump led with the Abraham Accords was historic. We built out infrastructure. I think that will stay. I think the people of those countries recognize that it's in their best interest to stay inside the Abraham Accords. I pray that that's the case. But I will say, some on the left haven't supported Israel, and that softens things, and it makes anti-Semitism more likely to take place. I hope that we see this administration confront this with all the energy it needs to.
Well, thank you for joining us once again. I'm sure back next week, and I appreciate your insight. You only get that insight at places like this show and Sekulow and at the ACLJ. Again, brand new blog up on ACLJ.org as we wrap up this first half hour. Go take a look at it. It's from Secretary Pompeo. It's called "The Biden Administration Continues to Let China Win." You'll see it on the front page right now at ACLJ.org. We got a second half hour of the show coming up. So if you don't get us live on your local radio station, find us live right now on YouTube, Facebook, or ACLJ.org. We'll be right back. 1 second.
Because of your support, because of the support of every member of the ACLJ, one of the practice areas that we've been able to develop is Freedom of Information Act requests, or FOIA requests.
It's thousands of pages of paper, and in those thousands of pages of paper, you usually find a nugget.
Government agencies acting out of control.
We have exposed that in our FOIA litigation, and we do that every day that we bring these cases.
It is your statutory right as an American citizen to have access to documents that reveal how the government is functioning, how your government is functioning.
We took it to the IRS. No one ever does that.
What the IRS was doing was violating the Constitution and statutory law. They can't do what they were doing before.
They've been hiding behind in the shadows. These FOIAs bring them to light.
How do we know? Because our FOIA litigation got that document.
Those of you that support the ACLJ, this is what it's all about at the end of the day.
Think we haven't been on this, folks? We've been on it.
Live from Washington, D.C., Sekulow Live. And now your host, Logan Sekulow.
Yes, welcome to Sekulow. If you're just joining us now, welcome. We're going to be discussing a lot of topics, but mainly we're focusing on sort of the hypocrisy of Nancy Pelosi, as we have seen the CDC reverse their decision on masks and said if you're fully vaccinated now is the time you can take off your mask indoors, outdoors, doesn't matter, you're good to go. And we've seen businesses start to roll this out. I said I was in a grocery store just yesterday when the announcement was made in that chain, and everyone sort of cheered. There was a cool moment, and everyone who felt like they wanted to remove their mask did. Some did not, some did. That's the society we live in. If you want to wear a mask, great. If you don't, also now and you're fully vaccinated, according to the CDC, you're good to go. However, Will, even in the building, you're okay. But as soon as you step foot in the chambers, Nancy Pelosi says, you walk in, you get a $500 fine without a mask.
And it really is about the virtue signaling of the left of let's remain masked in our chamber. And one thing, if you've ever turned on C-SPAN and watched House proceedings on the floor of the House, it's mostly empty. Yeah. Except for like the State of the Union or a joint address to Congress or a huge piece of legislation at 3 a.m. There's no one else in there.
You saying Congress just doesn't show up to do the job sometimes? Is that what you're trying to tell me?
I know it's shocking, Logan,
I know,
but
the
most of the time they're
don't
not
like to
there.
work for their people. I'm so surprised.
But even if it weren't just about like, okay, the vaccination rates within the chamber are high enough that we can go along with the compliance of the CDC guidelines. The fact that most of the time no one's in there, and it's just individuals trying to have a moment to give a floor speech and play politics in political theater, it shows you even more absurdly how much this is just about virtue signaling. Andy, what do you think?
Yeah, I agree with you. I sat in the Senate chamber for 3 weeks, and let me tell you, that's a crowded place. The desks are on top of each other. Everybody is cheek to jowl, as we say in the Senate. And Schumer, the majority leader who has the authority supposedly to do it, has said, we don't need to wear a mask if you're fully vaccinated. Now, you just go across the Capitol to this massive cavernous House chamber where nobody is in there ever, except, as you say, for addresses by the president or for major votes, which they come in and vote and leave. And Speaker Pelosi, just to exercise her authority, her power, because that's what it is, a power grab and an exercise in authority by this California Democrat who happens to be the Speaker, says if you're on the floor of the House, you either wear a mask or you're going to get $500 fine. Who are you to say this? Well, you're the Speaker of the House. You have the authority to do it. But it's not exactly right that in the Senate, where they're jammed up with each other, they don't have to do it. And if you just go across, then it's just crawling with the coronavirus in the House chamber. And that's where you got to put your mask on. Makes no sense.
And Harry, this always comes back to, it just feels like agenda over. I mean, we've said, again, we've heard follow the science for the last year. And as a show that has been pretty particular in saying, yes, we've been following science. We've been following all the guidelines we needed to follow. But when these moments happen, you realize there is something greater than the science, and that is the agenda and the narrative.
The agenda, the narrative, power, and control at the end of the day. Unfortunately, Congress, particularly from a left-wing perspective, is given a protective mask, if you will, by the mainstream media, which provides cover for the emptiness of Congress. And so I thought Will's description of a mostly empty chamber was indeed a brilliant metaphor for Congress being a group of largely empty suits. Basically, Congress people are a testament to one thing and one thing only, the human capacity to remain vacuous every single day.
All right. Could have said it better myself. We are going to be taking phone calls coming up. 1-800-684-3110. Get on there. I know you got a lot more to say. I know you all do. We're going to get to that coming up. This was the short segment. Next segment, longer segment. Just going to teach you. We're just educating Will. Follow the format here.
There's a clock.
There's a clock. Yeah,
each and every day.
Yeah, so if you don't know that, next segment's longer, and I'll be taking calls. 1-800-684-3110. We'll be right back with more on Sekulow.
The Office of the attending physician recently announced like relaxed mask guidance for different parts of the Capitol. However, on the House floor, members, when they're not speaking, still have to wear masks, according to do you believe that this is contributing to some mask confusion? Because obviously we're seeing that outside the Capitol, and by not following the new CDC guidelines for fully vaccinated individuals on the House floor, is that causing more confusion?
I think that we're going to continue to follow the public health guidance. Some clarification, I think, was recently issued by Dr. Monahan, and I think from the very beginning we've maintained the position that we're going to let the science guide us, the public health expertise guide us.
You can take precautions. If you want to wear a mask, then so be it. Every Democrat that wants to wear a mask or Republican should be able to wear a mask. But for those who, like myself, I had a really severe case of COVID-19. I've been vaccinated. I had 2 vaccinations. I should be able to have the choice on wearing that mask or not. That's the choice that it should be, and it's just simply not right now.
Well, we would just like to abide by the science. What's interesting is you look at this building, there's a chamber for the House and a chamber for the Senate. But apparently, COVID works differently in both chambers. Because in the Senate, you don't wear a mask. In the House, you have to wear a mask. The only difference is the Speaker. She doesn't want to abide by the CDC rules. She actually wants to have greater control.
This is about science and governance. And science and governance, we have a responsibility to make sure that the House of the Representatives chamber is not a petri dish.
Nancy Pelosi has attacked several of my members, threatening to fine or fining them. She does not want to give us a platform to be able to attack her anti-science, anti-common sense rulings on the House floor. I believe it's just another way to divide us. She wants to create division inside of this House at all times because she thinks she can profit off that kind of division.
Welcome back to Sekulow. We're going to be taking some calls. Let's go ahead and take some, because some of you guys have been hold for 1 minute, but some of you have been hold for half an hour. So let's take those calls first. Let's go to Michael, who's calling in Maryland on line 1. Michael, thanks for holding. I appreciate it.
My pleasure. Thank you, Logan, for all that you guys do. I just love this topic, and not that you need any more ammunition, but it's quite an interesting commentary that you have to have your driver's license to get a vaccination, but they're trying to push through that we can vote without one.
Right. Of course, again, it's a political agenda, political narrative. Yes, to get most medical procedures, I think you probably have to show some form of ID.
Well, the difference is they want to know who you are when you're getting your vaccine. Yeah. So, I mean, that makes sense, right? They want to make sure that if you signed up for an appointment, that you're the person getting the vaccine. Well, but they don't mind the voting. That's different. Like, they don't care who's voting. No. That's right. Like, I feel like that's the whole point.
Yeah, exactly. They want to create a registry for it's one thing, but not it's just there. Let's just keep it. Has the person been alive? I don't know. They got a vaccine.
We just mailed them a ballot this time.
Yeah, it's fine. It's fine. Restricted the voter rights. All right, let's go moving on to some other calls. And hey, if you want to call in, because I'm taking calls, again, explaining how this works, because I'm taking calls, it opens up phone lines. So you give us a call, 1-800-684-3110. Let's go to Scott in New Mexico on line 3. You're on the air.
Hey, guys. Thanks for taking my call.
You're welcome. You're on the air.
Hey, my point, I think we're getting a real good view of who the deep state is with Clinton and Kerry and Biden and Pelosi.
Yeah, I mean, this is beyond deep state. I think this is the face of the state at this point. This is sort of Harry. These are your major players out there that he's referencing: Pelosi, Kerry, Biden. They're all up front and center saying. But the difference is there is a fracture in an odd way between the Biden administration saying, "Hey, look, mask, we're done," and Pelosi trying to still keep her narrative going.
I think that's precisely correct. I also would point out that it took the Biden administration quite some time to actually follow the science coming from the CDC. And so now we have the House of Representatives declining, if you will, to follow the science, while, of course, claiming that they're following the science. This is all theater, and I hope the American people will see through it very, very quickly, and they hopefully will begin to ignore what the House Speaker continues to say and live their own lives based on personal responsibility, personal accountability, and science, as opposed to arbitrary, capricious ideas associated with Pelosi's understanding of science, which I would submit is pretty juvenile.
Right, exactly. Well, we talked about this personal responsibility. And that's what we've seen a lot of the companies, even in the businesses, they've started to use that language, which is, we are not going to make you provide, well, we probably don't even have the staffing to, because no one can, because there's lots of jobs available right now. I don't know if you know this. I went to a Dunkin' Donuts this morning, and the woman said, hey, listen, who was working there, it's going to take me a minute to get your 3 donuts together because I'm the only one who showed up. And we, please, if in big signs, you go into a restaurant and there'd be like a sign for like, come to Mother's Day. And now it's now hiring. Please come work for us. It's wild to see. But a lot of the verbiage that's coming out of big corporate is personal responsibility, which is, we're not going to tell you, we're not going to make you show us that you've had a vaccine. We're just saying, you had the vaccine. We're following the CDC. Come in, do your thing. We're not mandating anything. We're not finding anyone. We're not going to start being in the business of, show us your papers.
Which individual liberty and personal responsibility are foundations of this country. That's what we were born out of. That's what the founding fathers were going after. But what you're seeing by the left is this push against that, against the foundations of our country. And you see this across the board with climate change, with the Green New Deal, with all the things that they're trying to get passed under the COVID relief bills that have nothing to do with that. But there was an op-ed published by Time magazine from 2 physicians. One is an epidemiologist, and the other is a physician and professor of global health at Duke University. And they had a pretty drastic thing to say in this article because they were pushing back against the CDC rule change and the Biden administration taking that up. And they said the Biden administration and the CDC have adopted a new rhetoric of personal responsibility that does not match the reality of the pandemic today. The government is abandoning its responsibility to keep the population healthy. It has eliminated guidance meant to protect the public's health and place the onus on individuals to protect themselves. Vaccination is being promoted as the only nationwide approach to prevent COVID-19. So even the left and people in the scientific and medical community, to some degree, some are now coming out and blasting the Biden administration in a paragraph that makes it sound like they're super conservative. Right. Talking about individual responsibility and personal freedoms and things like that nature, that they're saying this is a bad thing. Most of America thinks that this paragraph is a good thing, that they're now saying, you know what? Personal responsibility. We're not mandating blanket mask wearing for the entire nation, but you do see that there are many voices out there that are going to use their degrees and their positions at Duke University and things of that nature to try to push still more control-based science because, in their opinion, the government is abandoning its responsibility to keep the population healthy. I haven't read that line in the Constitution, that's the government's responsibility. And Harry, you're a professor, and you know the Constitution infinitely better than I do. Is that in there?
No, but of course, if you are an elitist, particularly a global elitist, you make up your own constitution.
You can find it.
And so one of the things that we should also place front and center is the difference between Texas and the state of New York. So if we go back a few months, guess what? Texas opened up its state. It eliminated mask mandates. And guess what? President Biden said Texas was being a Neanderthal. And this would lead to a huge spike in deaths. Guess what? Texas has done better in the interim period than the state of New York, which has kept not only all of the CDC mandates, but now the state of New York is claiming that they may not necessarily comply with the new mandates. Why? Because the CDC, believe it or not, is giving the American people too much liberty, too much control. So there is no scientific basis for the claims made by these individuals from suspect, I would say, universities, even though these universities have indeed a great reputation. But the great reputation is grounded in what? Invested capital that is being depleted every single day by idiotic statements by well-educated individuals.
I think that is one of the biggest concerns, which is when you look at this from a much bigger point of view. Like I said, the CDC is something for the last year you have had it kind of been a very divided nation in terms of how they felt about the CDC and their flip-flopping and their moving and the constant changes. Now, a lot of that is the way sciences work. It's not necessarily always the same. Things move, things adjust to try to figure out what's best for society in that moment. But when the left was so convinced the CDC was just on a political side that when they showed their signs of saying, hey, actually, we're maybe not as political as you think, our science says, when the CDC says you're good to go, they freak out. and then all of a sudden, they're the enemy, the CDC, after a year-long battle where, again, it feels like just it's all shifted. And that's just, well, where I think people who have concerns on the legitimacy of any of this, and not of the illness, legitimacy of the political side of this, it becomes much clearer. It becomes much more legitimate when this stuff happens.
Well, the CDC even admitted in their prior guidance, remember when they first said you can take the mask off outside, but indoors you still need to, even if you're vaccinated. Their rationale wasn't because we think that you can still transmit it if you're vaccinated. The rationale was people don't know if you're vaccinated or not, so if they see you inside, they may not know. That was never a scientific answer of you need to wear the mask inside because you can still transmit it. So they just came to a more logical conclusion a few weeks later and said, you know what? This isn't working.
Yeah, it was maybe safer to roll back than just eliminate immediately.
Exactly. So they even were admitting prior that wearing the mask indoors if you're vaccinated wasn't something that they thought was scientific. It was just we want to protect unvaccinated people from other unvaccinated people, of which we're saying if you are vaccinated. Very confusing logic. And they got it right, and the left freaked out.
Yeah, I think we're moving in the right direction. But yeah, you have to be very aware of what's going on around you. Hey, phone lines are open. Last segment of the show for the week. So if you've had any last minute frustrations, you've had things you wanted to say, and you just haven't had the opportunity to say it, now's the time. Just made the phone screen real happy. 1-800-684-3110. 1-800-684-3110. We do have about 4 lines open right now. 4 lines. So if you call right now, I bet you'll make it on 1-800-684-3110. Always check out the work of the ACLJ at aclj.org. Again, that brand new blog by Mike Pompeo is up. We'll be right back with the last segment of the day.
For 30 years, the American Center for Law and Justice has been dedicated to protecting your religious and constitutional freedoms. Because of you, we've seen great success in the courts and Congress concerning the issues that matter most to you and your families. ACLJ Chief Counsel Jay Sekulow.
Our decades-long commitment to the Constitution and the rule of law is at the center of everything we do. The bottom line, our work could not take place without your generous support.
It's a critical time for our nation and our world. With so many challenges facing our country, the work of the American Center for Law and Justice has never been more important. There's no better way to support the ACLJ than through online giving.
We truly appreciate your financial support. Without it, it would be impossible to do our work here and around the globe. And the best way to support our work is to make your financial gifts online at aclj.org.
Donating online is safe and secure, and an online gift at aclj.org can be put to work immediately, enabling the ACLJ to continue the battle against abortion giant Planned Parenthood.
These are our young people in their 20s and 30s that are doing this, are fighting for life at a whole new level to beat back the abortion juggernaut. We've got a whole group of young lawyers that are defending them.
To protect Christians facing persecution.
The release of Andrew Brunson. He is the American evangelical from North Carolina, held in Turkey for more than 2 years.
We're grateful to ACLJ who put it out to these people, they were getting all this out.
I'm thankful, I'm grateful, and actually I'm astounded.
To stand up for our good friend Israel. To work to uncover the corrupt deep state in Washington, and so much more. Make a difference today. Support the work of the ACLJ online at aclj.org. Every dollar makes a difference. Give today online at aclj.org.
Phone lines are lighting up. We're going to get to as many of those calls as we can. Let's first start to wrap up this week of Sekulow, and I appreciate all of you who have been listening and tolerating Will and I and the rest of everybody else. The rest of you guys you get every week. Will and I, only on special occasions, we chime in. So thank you for joining us this week. Back to your regularly scheduled show next week, so don't worry. Let's start off, though, with Phil in California online, too. Phil, thanks for holding so long.
Hello. I would like to know, where does Nancy Pelosi get the authority to impose fines on United States representatives? And if she has that authority, what happens to those who choose to ignore those fines and refuse to pay them?
So, actually, the Constitution gives the House of Representatives the ability to make their own rules. It's Article 1, Section 5. Each House...
You're looking for something in the Constitution.
Right. This actually is in the Constitution, as
like
opposed to some other things we talked about today. But it says each House may determine the rules of its proceedings, punish its members for disorderly behavior, which is obviously an open-ended definition, and with concurrence of 2/3, expel a member. And as far as paying the fines, they don't have to write a check. Nancy Pelosi is going to do the hard work. They're just going to deduct it from their salary, because the House of Representatives has their own administrative office, and they actually pay the representatives from a central location. The federal government does. So it'll just be deducted from their paycheck. And their second occurrence, if they go maskless again and get fined, is $2,500. Minority Leader McCarthy, he actually tried to put forward a resolution to be voted on by the House to change the rule back to against the mask mandate, and it fell along party lines. The Democrats defeated his resolution, but that could have changed it. That could have reset the balance of things, gotten rid of the mask mandate, but the Democrats said, no, we're going to hold on to this power. We're going to allow the Speaker of the House to continue to enforce this mask mandate because it is a rule of the House currently. So it's actually the Constitution that gives them the authority to make that rule.
All right, we have some other questions and comments coming in. We'll do our best to answer some of these. I'll have to ask the panel if they know the answers too, because personally, I don't want to be held responsible. Maybe they could be. Let's go to Barbara in Virginia. You got a question. Go ahead.
Hi, good afternoon. I was just wondering if it's against HIPAA to ask about people's vaccines or vaccinations.
I don't know if we know the specific answer to that. Anybody here know this?
No, I don't know the answer to that. I know that there are certain things that with respect to the HIPAA law that you cannot ask, you cannot inquire into, cannot be disclosed, but whether you can inquire about medical information pertaining to whether they've been vaccinated or not, I have no idea.
And there are certain instances, schools and those where they do require certain paperwork.
I think that is correct, and I think a lot of the HIPAA regulations specifically apply to employers. And so one of the issues here is who is the ultimate employer, for instance, of a congressperson.
All right, let's continue on. Let's go to a couple of Kims. So we'll try to get to Kim that's been the longest, and then we'll go to Kim after this. But hey, also, we got to do some phone lines open. Got about 5 minutes left to show. 1-800-684-3110. 3110. Let's go to Kim in Indiana on line 3. Kim, welcome.
Hi, I really appreciate your show. I just want to tell you guys that.
Thank you.
I work for a state university, and we just received an email like two hours ago stating that all staff, faculty, and students have to be vaccinated. I'm just very upset about that because I'm strongly against the COVID vaccine.
Well, Kim, again, your personal decision to be made. I've said it publicly and on the air here today. I had the vaccine. I got no problem with it. I felt very at peace of getting the vaccine, and it's up to you, up to your family to decide that. When it comes to a place of business, though, having to put in certain mandates, is there anything?
Well, there may indeed be a couple of options, and I'm certainly no expert in the Indiana state constitution, but the Indiana state constitution may provide some rights for Kim. In addition, there may indeed be some federal constitutional rights because she works for a state university. And so one of the issues there, though, is Do you have both the resources and the time to litigate these issues? But one of the best sources of information, I think, on this particular question would indeed be members of the state legislature in Indiana, and they may be helpful in answering Kim's question.
Yeah, I mean, even if you go on our website, aclj.org, there's a get legal help specifically on these related things. It's not really within our expertise. So there's other options you can go to look for that. But I do know that there are certain instances where I've had to provide medical information. I know for other businesses that you've had to provide medical information, for schools. And that's things like, not like this is the first vaccine in existence, not like the other places haven't required it. Sometimes there are religious exemptions. Sometimes there are other exemptions. But again, not necessarily right on target what we talk about here. I do want to say, if you want to call us, we do have this kind of the last second for calls, 1-800-684-3110, 1-800-684-3110. While we're at it, I want to encourage you all to check out ACLJ.org. The website is continually changing. I think people maybe come for the show and leave, and they don't know that all of you write incredible pieces, whether it was the More Than Ever series, which is becoming a new video series, which is launching, whether it's our blogs that get updated every single day with writers, like I said, like this panel, and Mike Pompeo and Rick Grinnell, who put out new content every day. All the petitions you can sign are there. You can also, through there, listen to old shows, catch up, check all the legal resources. People calling in with legal help. There's a big button. You can click Get Legal Help. If you have a specific need that is within our purview, you can submit for legal help. You'll be assigned to an assistant, an attorney, and they'll get to work with you. And absolutely no cost. And that's because of the supporters of the ACLJ. So check out our website, aclj.org. Also, we don't talk about it too much. You can subscribe to the podcast. Every day you'll get this to your phone. You can download the app in the Apple iTunes or Apple App Store. You can also get it on, I believe, Roku and other places. There's other apps that are available for ACLJ where you can watch this show, as well as our feature films and documentaries. A lot of great content that comes out from the ACLJ. Because of the nature of this show, we just don't get to spend a whole lot of time talking about it. And it's really an amazing wealth of knowledge that's in there, as well as entertainment and shows and ways you can connect with us.
And a film that's on the app, if they were to go to for their Apple TV or Roku right now, that I think would be a great thing to watch this weekend if you're looking for something to watch, is the Unshaken documentary. It's the first film from ACLJ Films, so it was filmed, I believe, in 2009, 2008, or 2009.
It's been a long time.
But it was, we've referenced it several times this week on air, but it was during a conflict in Israel when your dad and Jordan were both there, and rockets were coming in, and they had to go into the rocket shelter. So it's a firsthand look at what happened during conflict between the Israelis and Hamas, but also it has a story about the work the ACLJ did to help a family that was in the Gaza Strip, whose husband was murdered in the streets for running a Christian bookstore. It was the only Christian bookstore in the Gaza Strip. He was murdered in the streets, and the ACLJ worked to get the remaining family members out of Gaza because of the threats from Hamas and the other terrorists against them. So that's called Unshaken. ACLJfilms.com, or on those apps that Logan referenced.
You can find it there. I appreciate everyone who joined us this week. Thank you so much. Thanks to this whole panel, and for everyone who's called in, all the guests we've had. It's been an excellent week of broadcasting. You can go catch up, like Will said, on older broadcasts by checking out the podcast feed as well. And until next time, if you want to support the ACLJ, we'd love you to do so. ACLJ.org. Take a look at what we're doing. We'll be back on Monday with brand new episodes of Sekulow. Thanks for listening.